This comes from the Office of Prevention, Research, and Education within the Federal Division for Children. So we all know, or most, I would assume most of us on this Zoom ECHO call know about self-regulation. It has become recognized because it's so important for people to be able to help themselves feel better, feel more regulated. And it allows us to do things like use all of our executive functions and plan, control our emotions, participate in things. In general, when we think about kids needing self-regulation, it means that they have self-control and the ability to manage their own behaviors. What has possibly gotten lost as we've gotten on the bandwagon for self-regulation is the idea that self-regulation is developed through interaction. It is not simply people being able to take care of themselves independently. And in reality, saying to a kid, you need to self-regulate is a little counterintuitive because self-regulation develops because they are participating with other adults who are able to self-regulate. And that whole process is termed co-regulation. So we're going to dip into that a little bit here. So co-regulation, what is it and why is it important? It is a supportive process between the adult and the child, all the way up through young adults, that helps to foster the ability to self-regulate. This term started out in the literature as an adult supporting an infant, because as infants, you just cried and an adult helped you to feel better, whether that was being fed or getting changed or being laid down for a nap. But it is now used to describe that entire interactive process from infancy through young adulthood. So the focus for co-regulation is more on the caregiver as opposed to the child themselves. And the caregiver is the one who contributes to the child, the youth, or the young adult being able to regulate. And the caregiver could be any adult who provides care and support. It's not limited just to the parent or the guardian, but behavioral health providers, teachers, coaches, youth groups, mentors, all of those things. The three broad categories of support that caregivers can provide are going to be on these next three slides. So let's jump into those. Number one, you have to provide a warm and responsive relationship. In order for you to be able to, as a youth or as a child, to be able to pick up on the skills for regulating, you have to see it modeled for you. You have to understand that you are looking for cues and you respond to them, and you have to receive care when you are stressed. Caregivers who build strong relationships with their children, youth, and young adults support them through communication, through their actions, through just being interested in that young person. But that warm, responsive relationship is the first leg, if you would, of the three-legged stool. The second one is structuring the environment. The environment needs to be safe enough and structured enough that it provides a buffer against environmental stressors. What this means is everybody has stress. Everybody has things that they have to deal with. But the younger you are, the more you need somebody else to be a buffer between you and the stress. It isn't that we expect young kids to feel stress and we say to them, you take care of that yourself. It's that consistent, predictable response from the caretaking adults around you help you understand what needs to happen when stress occurs. Routines are particularly helpful for that. Clear goals and boundaries and rules are also helpful. The third part of these three top items on how to co-regulate, including actual teaching, coaching, those self-regulating skills. But notice on this slide that the first word up there is modeling. So what is probably most important for the youth is to have an adult in their world, in their space, who is modeling their own self-regulation. It's probably no surprise to the behavioral health folks on the call and in the room that when we have multi-generational trauma and stress, and those particular children and youth haven't seen a lot of strong modeling for self-regulation, those are the ones who are going to struggle the most when they hit the school system and don't have those initial skills under their belt. Even though all 5-year-olds who start going to school aren't great at self-regulation, the ones who have had stable, calm, modeling self-regulation at home are going to do the best and pick up on the skills the easiest. Notice at the end of this paragraph, it talks about scaffolding, that as you're young, you have sort of broad tasks to try to help you self-regulate. You get snuggled and hugged and squeezed and all those things that help you feel better. And as you get older, the tasks and the way that you are coached and taught really change until by the time you're an adolescent, it's almost all verbal and you're just doing the light coaching and letting them know what they could do. But to co-regulate successfully, it is about the caregivers. And here's some strategies. Well, not so much strategies, just things that the caregivers need to do. They have to pay attention to their own feelings and reactions during stressful interactions with a child, youth, or young adult. And this is probably one of the key problems with multi-generational trauma and traumatic stress. When a child becomes upset, it is not unusual for the caregiver to be triggered and to get upset with them. And that is, probably the opposite of helpful, because what they need to do is be aware of their own feelings, get a handle on them, regulate themselves, and then help their child to feel more regulated. So caregivers need to pay attention to their own thoughts and beliefs about these sorts of behaviors, and use strategies to self-calm so that they can respond effectively and compassionately. One of the key strategies, honestly, for caregivers is to take a deep breath and to utilize therapeutic breaks or take a pause so that you then respond more calmly and grounded to the child that you're working with. Self-regulation when you're stressed out, when the caregiver is stressed out, is not easy, especially when there are multiple activities and stressors vying for your attention. Obviously, lots of parents have more than one child in their family, and so it is not unusual for everyone to melt down at the same time. So caregivers need support, practice, and coaching from friends and family or professionals to build their own coping and calming skills, which in turn can aid them in helping and build and coach those skills in their own children. People who have more internal or environmental factors may have more sensitized neurological responses to interpersonal and environmental stimuli. Folks, this is a lot of words to say. Our traumatized families are going to struggle more because they're more fine-tuned to the stress. They overinterpret it, they respond and react to it. They could be easily overwhelmed by sensations, all of the 5 senses, and by their own emotions. They have strong reactions and they find things to be overstimulating. This is not just the youth. This is not the child and the youth. These are also the caretakers. And when all those people live together in the same environment, there's a lack of people doing the appropriate modeling and calming. I wanted to hone in specifically on co-regulation support for adolescents. There's the same place where I got this information has co-regulation information for young children, for middle-aged children, and for young adults. But I picked adolescents because several of our recent cases, and I believe today's case, is in the adolescent range, if I'm not mistaken. So I thought we'd highlight these today. So for adolescents, of course, we start with that warm, responsive relationship, provide support and empathy in times of intense emotion. I think this is, the phrase I like about this is connection before correction. Sometimes when people are responding strongly, it's not that they need you to tell them what to do or to calm down or to self-regulate. It's that you need to validate the fact that they're having intense emotions. And when you can connect that way, on the right side of the brain, you'll have much more impact than when you move over to the left side of the brain for more structured ideas and coaching. Remember that you need to monitor and coach those more sophisticated self-regulation skills, but not just in one context. We should be coaching across contexts. Kids live in a variety of contexts: their home, their family, the school and their peers, a neighborhood, other environments, faith-based organizations, and the Ys and the Scouts and all the things. And so these things have to be coached across the board, not just in a singular context. We want to limit some of their opportunities for risk-taking behavior, which just means keep them in safe places. Provide opportunities to make decisions, though. We shouldn't be so directive by the time they're adolescents. We should be asking them, what do you think you can and should do? Give time and space to calm down in times of conflict. A lot of times adults want kids to be instantly compliant and instantly responsive when they give them direction. And the truth is we all need that moment. We all need several moments to catch our breath and be more appropriately regulated. And it is catching your breath that helps you get to that regulated spot. But we do want to prompt their use at this point as adolescents of their own organizational and planning skills to complete things. But we will continue at this stage to give clear rules, boundaries, and even consequences to incentivize making good choices. Co-regulation support for adolescents. I left this slide in here because a lot of people know that the biggest time of brain development and construction is birth to 5. But not everyone understands that there's a complete period of remodeling in the brain during adolescence. And actually what that does for us is it's a good window of opportunity to do more coaching and strategic interventions so that they are good at making decisions, solving problems, thinking about the future, and frankly, self-regulating. But they still need all of that support to do so. Even though adolescents are developmentally separating from caregivers and seeking independence, they still need people who will listen to them. They need to listen supportively when they have strong emotions, but also provide space and support for them to pull themselves together. You can coach for coping skills in a multitude of contexts, but they have to have opportunities also for independent decision-making and action. So they really have an equal need for caregivers to monitor their actions, protect them from danger, and support their own responsible choices. Caregivers. Skills for the caregivers to teach and coach across adolescence include being aware and attend to their emotions. Sometimes you have to overlook the actual words. They might not be worded the way you like it, or they might use language that's a little outside your norm, but try to listen for the emotions underneath the message. Strategies to tolerate and manage normal levels of stress and distress. And think about normal levels of stress and distress. Peer conflict, having a test coming up, worrying about the holidays the same as we do, that sort of thing. We are not talking about overwhelming distress. We are not talking about catastrophe. Because if that's happening, like with all other youth, we need to step in and buffer as much as we can. So what we want to do, though, is coach around normal levels of stress and distress. Helping them understand and giving them strategies and skills for organization, time management, and task completion. And so important at this stage to start thinking longer term. A lot of times, I feel that the adolescents that we work with, and particularly in this ECHO, where kids are multi-system involved, the youth do not have what we call futures orientation. When you're busy trying to survive day to day, you have a hard time seeing yourself out there in the future, in relationships, in college, in careers, all of the things out there that if you had a less stressful childhood, people probably asked you periodically, what do you want to be when you grow up? But our kids and families that we work with are so focused on surviving day to day, they are occasionally missing that futures orientation, and adolescence is a time to start working that back in. helping them with effective decision-making. And I think I mentioned the last time I talked about resiliency, problem solving is the #1 missing skill for traumatized youth and people in general. So helping them with problem solving strategies and making decisions around the future. And finally, let's not forget compassion for self and others. Caregivers, educators, mentors, all of the workers out there listening in. #1, build a positive relationship with each individual that you work with. Structure and help to encourage structuring the environment to reduce regulatory demands and support skill enactment. Communicate clear rules, expectations, and consequences. It shouldn't be a guess, nor should we say they should just know. They should just be respectful. Let's just assume that if something's going wrong, they don't know the edges, and we should just clearly and calmly let them know. Instruct, monitor, coach for age-appropriate self-regulation skills, including mindfulness at this age, and incorporate activities to practice those self-regulation skills. Caregivers will only be effective at co-regulation if they can successfully self-regulate. If you're working with caregivers who have their own struggles with self-regulation, then you need to flip this on the side and do all this work directly with the caregiver, because they're the ones who are going to be more likely to pass those skills on to their own children. Staff supports might include mindfulness instruction, reflective supervision, and opportunities for personal timeouts when needed. Oh, and that was the end. I didn't put a closing slide on there. I'm sorry. Usually I do. But that is your little blip on co-regulation. I hope that you found it helpful.